think it's a little too late to say Happy New Year.
It is after the 7th. That's what is it? Larry David has established that you can't say it after the 7th.
You're not allowed.
But nevertheless, 2023. This is the first you're hearing from us, old boys here. All the horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're talking viruses. And interestingly, you'll probably notice my voice is a little funkified because I am infected with the Omicron.
Yeah, Ian went above and beyond. Knew this episode was coming up. For preparation. Got him so sick.
I could know what these people are going through, as I definitely have felt like a zombie myself.
That's
all the brain fog. Yes, I'm going to put that at the front here. I got a little brain fog, so if I'm not showing as articulate as normal, forgive this old
If you hear any
sicko.
long pauses or if you start staring at the screen, that's what's happening.
Or if my eyes turn black, we know we're in trouble.
Oh, man.
But today we're going to talk about specifically three of the more contemporary virus movies out there, or actually Last of Us is what we're going to talk about first, and that's the new series on HBO. Looking forward to hearing from you because you played the game.
Oh, man.
And then we'll tackle Sick, which is Kevin Williamson's new outing on Peacock, and then finally The Sadness, which is just dropped on Shudder recently, right? But it is a 2021 movie.
Yeah, you know, I noticed it because it started popping up on people's best of 2022 lists.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe it got released out there in 2021, but we finally got a hold of it because it's a Taiwanese movie, which is really interesting. Looking forward to talking about the politics in that movie, given everything that's going on between China and Taiwan right now.
Right.
But first and foremost, the show people have been waiting for, I'd say maybe more than any other show in the last year.
And I believe it already broke like premiere records on HBO, beating, Game of Thrones and one other major.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, because House of Dragons actually just won the Golden Globe for Best Drama. So I was kind of shocked by that because I liked it, but Severance was way better.
Yes.
Interestingly, the showrunner shouted out Severance, which, is horror in our eyes. But The Last of Us, I would say it pulls you in immediately, and it's not surprising given that it's an hour and 20 minutes, this first episode. It is like a movie.
Well, I appreciate and respect that they not only stuck really close to the game and how, because the beginning of the game, there's no flashback like they did. It sort of just starts up until like the end of the first episode. That's the intro of the game.
Okay, so tell me what happens, because obviously the spoiler alert for everybody who you would think you would be following,
right,
if you hadn't played the game, was Pedro Pascal and his daughter in this. So Joel and his daughter, what is her name? Sarah. So Sarah, unfortunately, bites it mid-episode in a very interesting way. Do you think there's any consciousness? Okay, that's my question. Did that happen in the game?
Yes. Sorry, that's what I was...
Cop kills her?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's
that's a big deal.
And if you're a fan of the game, you knew it was coming. Nora and I were watching it. She had no idea, and she's like, they just killed off a major character, which you really don't. The show did a really good job in a short amount of time introducing this character, and I think the biggest challenge they had was really getting you to like her. Which she's very likable, but
very likable.
Getting you on her side. We think this is our main character, and then they just remove her from the show.
And it's a rough death too, because she gets shot in the stomach and essentially just bleeds out in his arms. Very tragic. I think it sets the whole tone for the whole show. Granted, I think most people going into it who had seen promos saw Bella Ramsey and Pedro. And they're like, "Who's this girl?" And she kind of buried. Yeah, you knew what was going to go on. I think because I hadn't played the game, but that's what I immediately said. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't seen this girl in any of the posters. She's gonna die, and she did. And it was tragic. But you're absolutely right. They built it up so you did care, and then you cared about Pedro that much more. Yeah. And it made sense then, because when we flash forward, he's missing his brother Tommy, who's the other main dude in this. His younger brother Tommy, who he's working. Is he working for Firefly? Can you help me out on how is Tommy missing now? Because ultimately, the latter half of this episode is Joel wanting to save his brother, find his brother.
Right, his brother is involved with this secret, rebellion group, and he's just kind of radio silent.
Okay, but he is working with Firefly.
Yes. And that is why Joel has to even get involved with them in the first place. I mean, they did such a good job of sticking to the game because, the thing that I'm really curious about is if they're going to, or do they have plans to extend this series into multiple seasons? Because, it's hard to say when you've got a video game, you've got a beginning and an end. There's a sequel, obviously, to the video game. But they might already start working some of that sequel stuff into the first season. I don't know. So
can they milk the first game into 2 seasons?
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of wondering if that's what they're going to do, because in this world, it's going to take them a lot longer to get to places. Like, you look at a show like Game of Thrones and they just jump across the world in no time. They're really going to have to make it part of this. It's going to be like a road trip type of a thing.
Right, which I'm all on board for. A quick question I wanted to ask you, though, is having played the game, does it kind of ruin the show a little bit for you? Like, not ruin it, but diminish the effectiveness of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, because there's going to be less surprises, right? I know. I mean, I guess what I'm looking forward to as a fan of the game is seeing like the clickers and, they're basically the zombies and how they pull them off. On the show,
the clickers. So these are zombies we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, some of them are different. Some of them actually make that noise, like a
oh, that's cool.
Sound. Yeah. There's like different.
So essentially, it's a lot like Resident Evil, where you got the different kind of like variants, but this apparently has done it much more effectively.
Yes, correct. There are different.
Because I think I did see an article about season 2 is definitely happening. I saw some sort of headline about learn when season 2 is going to be airing. Maybe they were getting ahead of themselves.
They probably were. But
given the ratings, you're absolutely right. They are going to probably, I don't know if it's going to go Game of Thrones length,
no.
But I think we'll probably get 4 or 5, maybe 3 to 4 at the minimum. So, I'm on board.
Yes, 100%. And I think, HBO doesn't do what network television does, and they really drag things out. Like Walking Dead, for example,
right.
You would hate to see them do something like that with this property.
Yes, it just be because it becomes so redundant. There has to be. That's what's interesting about the video game format, because they have to keep a game going for 60 hours of gameplay. So there's all kind of these quests that they can kind of build into the arc. That's definitely cool. And you're right. So it's going to become a road trip. And we started in Austin, but apparently he's gotten up to Boston by the time we're following him. What is it, 6 years later, I think, after she had croaked?
No, it's more than that, because I think it's like 20 years, isn't it? Because it starts in 2003.
Is it? Oh, shoot.
And then they jump to 2023.
Present day, you're right.
Yes.
Okay, you're absolutely right. Okay, so we're in 2023 in Boston, but he's going to save his brother who's in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
But along the way, because he's trying to get a battery, he's with Anna Torv, who people might remember from Fringe.
Yeah.
She's kind of this a smuggler of sorts who can get things for him, specifically a car battery in this.
Right.
Is she in the game? What is their relationship? Is there nothing romantic there?
No. You know what? I think they might allude to that. I mean, because this, Joel is a man and a lot of time has passed, and you look for, he lost his daughter. You're looking for other, types of just
of course
connection.
Yeah.
And so I think there might be something.
It's a hard world. Get any sort of comfort you can.
Yeah, I mean, there are little things like that where I forget like certain relationships. Something that's really cool is the leader of Firefly, Marlene, is actually the voice of the character in the show.
That's
in the game. So they use the same actor. And I heard like even the clickers and the zombie, I think they use the same voice actors for there. It's just really
awesome.
Cool. Yeah.
She's good. I liked her. I also like her sidekick. I'm trying to remember the character's name. Let me see if I can't find it. But the sidekick to the leader, do you know him? She got her ear blown off
right
at the end. She's fun too. I like their dynamic because she's kind of playing second fiddle to her, and she finally lets her in on what's going on.
I don't know.
There was some really strong backup players, but then there was a couple backup players I didn't love. And thankfully, the one that I didn't love the most also gets his comeuppance at the end. So ultimately, we have Pedro's Joel, who's making money on the side by selling drugs. This was another question of the video game I wanted to ask. I guess he's selling hydro. Is that it? Is that something that's that's not a real drug here in our world, but it's not something that's not like a power up in the game. You get hydro and then you can fight more. Okay, that's what I really want to know. Is like, I wonder if that's a little Easter egg.
Good question, though. I mean, I'm sure there's some things they have to, because in the game you definitely start off. I mean, it starts off the same locations, and while you're in Boston, you kind of have to like sneak around the streets because you're not supposed to be out, but because you're kind of a smuggler, so I'm trying to wonder if like that's what we learned about Joel. Was he actually selling drugs to these people? Like, I can't remember that. I am so ready to replay the game already, though.
I don't blame you, and I just wish I was a PlayStation person, not a Nintendo person, for that very reason. But I think it's coming to PC. I think that game is finally making its way to PC. This has been a PlayStation exclusive for like a decade now, right? It's old,
and
isn't
they just remastered it. They just put out part 1 for PS5, and they're gonna
nice.
It's
I definitely want to play it too. I might wait till after the season, though. What I was mentioning is I didn't like the cop that he was selling the drugs to at all. And then thankfully at the end, he's the one they run across when they're trying to then get Bella.
Yeah.
Where are they taking Bella again? Because they have
Ellie's character, they're dropping her off to another location, to a different group of Fireflies. And obviously that's just too easy, right? The simple but impossible task. So
where is it? I missed it.
I don't know if they actually said, like, I don't think it's as far as you think it is. I think they just it's just outside of Boston city limits. I think they just need to smuggle her out.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that's not going to work out. She's going to be on the road with them to Wyoming.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
But I did notice when they were doing the little map, when the guy who knew where Tommy was telling him where he was, they went past Chicago. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a little Chicago zombie action. That would be amazing.
And I think that's
given we're Chicago based.
Right. I'm thinking that's where the show is going to differ the most. They're going to be able to like embellish some of these stops along the way.
Here's my question for you. Let's talk fear factor. What parts do you think were the most effective in this one? In this premiere?
Well, the beginning, before we even lose the daughter, like that whole idea of the neighbors turning, that old lady was really creepy.
That's what I was going to say. I would say for me, it's the subtle stuff outbreak, specifically when she's kind of like going to borrow a DVD from the old lady neighbor. Then you have the grandma in the chair in the background. And she just like, she has this weird kind of contortion, and it's just like her mouth is open. I don't know if she's already turned or turning in that process, but she didn't see that. And then you see the dog looking at her all like, something's wrong with grandma. Those are the kind of things that I like a lot. And that was really effective, I thought.
Well, and then there's that whole idea that like this woman is wheelchair bound, and now she's moving like this. The fungus has taken over her body, that it's basically healed itself in a way where now she's like a contortionist.
Yes,
and
that is interesting. And I love the way that they started it off, because they really kind of gave context for what this infection is, because we said viruses, but in this case, it is more of a fungus. But have you seen those pictures of ants specifically that do get infected with some sort of fungus that like does mess with their brain, but then like grows out of them right. in the same way we're seeing in this, because it does seem like it's actually based on something that does happen in the real world versus a lot of the other kind of virusy pathogen stuff that we deal with.
There was this amazing subtle detail in the pilot, and I think people are just starting to pick up on it now, is that this fungus, it's being transferred through like flour. So do you remember in the beginning, the daughter wants to make pancakes for him.
Yes.
But they don't make pancakes, so they don't eat the flour-based thing. Then outside, the next door neighbors, they've got biscuits.
Oh, what kind of cookies are you making? Chocolate chip? Raisin?
Right. But first, it's like, we have got biscuits. And
I didn't
she's
get
like,
that.
oh, that's Joel's favorite. He's like, oh, I'm on Atkins. And they're like, what's that?
Yes.
So he then turned down another flour-based product. Yeah. So there's that. That's basically explaining why some people were getting infected. They said
that's interesting. So there's some sort. The fungus is it? How does it? I'm still unclear on
flour and yeast and living bacteria that you
interesting
bacteria basically that you come across on a daily basis, like yeast based products. Those
and. Oh, that's interesting because in the way that we now GMO everything, so we're altering what a plant naturally was, and then when that fungus gets into this new food supply, maybe it can turn into something like this. Yeah. That's I didn't mean to cut you off. You're saying?
No. I'm just saying that's such an amazing detail that I'm not even sure they really go.
I didn't get that
in the game.
I missed that.
I think they, not that they pan over it, but. There's reasons.
Yeah, maybe that'll come up more, but that's a really good point that he dodged 2 bullets ultimately.
Yeah, and there may have been another one there that I just remember those 2 jumping out, and there's a reason they're telling you they're not eating pancakes. They're not in. Yeah. It's really, really.
I also really enjoyed the scene where he's carrying her, saying, "Don't look." I mean, okay, here one of the tropes of zombie movies is the chase, right? Everything we're talking about, you're gonna have your standard early chase scene. But I like that he was carrying her, telling her to close her eyes. And when they ran through that diner, for some reason, it just felt like such a cinematic scene to me. Yeah. This was leading up to when she gets shot by the cop, but I was like, "This is what I'm on board for. Mm-hmm. This is the HBO zombification that I was hungry for."
Definitely,
yeah.
And they're going to be
production
able to do
value
a
wise,
lot more production value. There's a great shot at the end of the episode where Joel and I forget, basically his partner in crime, they come across that creature that's stuck to the wall.
Oh, yes.
That's
where it's been fully fungified.
Yes, and that is exactly what they look like in the game, and some of them can come back to life from that. It's really cool. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, Tess is Anna Torv's character. Yes, Tess. I'm wondering how long she's going to be around, honestly. She's a big actress, right. She's off the heels of that Fincher show on Netflix where they interview serial killers or whatever, and then, of course, Fringe.
Well, there was a couple of great character actors.
Mindhunter. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So when we learn that she loses the battery and she's talking to the other actor.
That guy's recognizable.
Yeah, he was recognizable, but I mean, again, not very long scenes. No. So I think I guarantee you people were joining this because they're just big fans of the franchise.
I could see that. I mean, I'm reading a little bit about they designed it when they were writing it, they had Pedro in their mind for Joel. Yeah. And then within 24 hours of him getting offered the role, he took it. And he's one of the highest paid actors now with $600,000 an episode.
Between that and Mandalorian, this guy is killing it. You know what?
When the Mandalorian, is he in that suit though? Or is it just his voiceover?
I think it is. I think it is him.
You think he's in there?
Maybe not for everything because it's easy to pull off different stunts, but that's a good question. I think
because I would wonder if he is. Honestly.
You know what? If his name's appearing in those credits every episode, I don't think it matters.
That's true. That's a good point. And frankly, there is subtle stuff with the body that you can consider acting too. So
let's talk
maybe
about
he is.
Pedro Pascal really quick. Because I know you're a big Buffy fan. Did you know he started off on an episode of Buffy?
He is a vampire in Buffy. I didn't remember that immediately, but I have seen it pop up over the internet now.
It just popped up for me.
I don't really remember whether or not that vampire had a lot of...
It's just really funny. Like he's in his 20s, and it just looks so silly. He looks so silly because he looks like a little baby.
Yes, the storylines of Buffy hold up, but the makeup has always been one of my issues in how they make the vampires look. Not my favorite. But speaking of which, shout out to Sarah Michelle Gellar's got a new show coming out next week. Wolfpack. I did not watch, what is it, The Wolf Boy? Was it Teen Wolf? I think it's a spinoff of Teen Wolf. That kind of makes me a little weary. But it's been a minute since she's done genre, so I'm assuming it had to have been halfway decent pitch to her. But nevertheless, back on our zombification. There was one moment where I was questioning whether or not I liked the direction, and that's when they're going to get the car battery, and they're climbing up, and then they smell gun smoke, and then they go in there, push the body that's dead against the wall. So we missed that whole action sequence that just occurred where they were going to get the battery. They walk in literally right after it happens. I think under normal circumstances you would see that. It felt strange for them to just walk in just as it was over, like a budgetary sort of thing, or maybe a timing. Maybe they did do it. They had to cut it out because it was already an hour and 20 minutes. What did you think about that? That was the only moment I was like, that's a questionable decision to just tell and not show, you know?
I would argue that there's probably purpose there, and maybe we haven't seen it yet. Maybe it's going to be jumping back to it. For starters, I think they did it to build up, like, are we going to see a zombie on the other side? Sort of build up that tension.
That's fair.
But wasn't there also a bulletin board, an explainer poster about, like, if you were bit here or if you were exposed here, this is how long it takes. So it might be something like that where they were killed, but they haven't turned yet. So
interesting.
It might be a scene where they cut back to, and, like, because that guy's dead in the hallway, he might pose a new threat.
Okay. All right. I'll buy that. So, and honestly, you need more of a quieter moment like that to actually absorb something like the poster on the wall. Yeah. So that makes sense. Yeah. Also dug the system that they have of playing music from different decades to kind of give you the orange, red, green, light, sort of dangerous levels. That was good. Yeah. And we find out, obviously, that Bella's Ellie, played by Bella, is kind of a tricky. She's pretty wise herself, and she's able to deduce that. She doesn't really show up a lot in this episode, right? No. It's pretty much Pedro's episode. Yeah. Did you love her in Game of Thrones? That's the only other place that I've seen her.
I think, she's also in His Dark Materials on HBO. I think they're big fans of her on HBO, and that's why they continue to cast her in these projects. She is an excellent actor. I think we're going to see some more of it. I think this first episode, you just called it, I think it was more about getting behind Joel, and his story. She nails the video game character, though, because Ellie has a mouth on her. It's F this, F that. It is so funny. A little girl just swearing all the time.
Do you remember when it first came out? Wasn't there a hubbub about how the girl plays Kitty, or the Elliot Page now, right? The former Ellen Page. Didn't it look a lot like her? Didn't they have like some lawsuit about how she felt like her likeness was ripped off?
I don't know if it was a lawsuit or they actually just used her like as a muse. Like,
really?
Yeah, they
for some reason I feel like she had issue with that.
That's interesting. I don't know. I remember hearing about it, but I don't remember if it was like a lawsuit or if it was just like a good question though.
It's got a lot of history, this game. That's why I'm like, it's one of the very few games out there that I haven't gotten to play that I'm desperate to play. This PlayStation doesn't have that many amazing proprietary properties but that's one of them for sure.
That's one. They have they have the Nathan Drake, the Uncharted series.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's exclusive on there anymore, though. It might be on Xbox. I could be wrong, but you're right.
They had a little sack boy. I like that little sack boy that they got. I remember that being a fun game. But I'm excited about what's to come in this. I think I've covered all of my talking points on this puppy. Same. I think hopefully we'll be able to talk more about it. Maybe when the whole season's done, maybe we can kind of mention as we're going along and doing other episodes how we're feeling about where it is.
Absolutely.
But I'm digging it. Well, let's move on to... when was it released? You're telling me Kevin Williamson, granted he's a co-writer, which I could tell. Sick on NBC's Peacock streamer.
This was released last week.
I see. Okay, so super fresh. Yeah. Had a lot of promise because at the beginning, because this takes place during COVID.
Yes.
So this is one of the first COVID horror movies. I know there's a couple other ones out there. There's something called The COVID Man, who's a serial killer, goes around when everyone's in lockdown killing. Didn't get great reviews, but it's an interesting thing to exploit now, and certainly there's heightened anxiety around it. But I didn't think the execution as a whole was great. I will give it this. I mentioned this to you. I felt like it moved quickly. The pacing of it I did like, and I think that was its strongest point, is that it felt like a Cabinet of Curiosity episode, even though it was an hour and 15 minutes.
Right.
Really short in that sense.
Yeah, I feel like it broke structure. Like, I feel like it broke almost traditional structure and just went like act 1 and 2 were almost just like the same act. And that's why it moves so quickly. And then you really get the story at the top of Act 3.
That's true. You really don't know what's going on.
Exactly.
You don't understand the motive for these killers in any sort of way. And granted, something like Scream, you really didn't know their motives until the end. But I don't know. It just felt different in this one. And I will say, it being Kevin Williamson, when we first see one of the killers at the beginning, it looks so much like the Scream character. You know, he's just, with the exception of the white mask, but you're still wearing a mask, you know, from a COVID mask with a black. I didn't really like the aesthetic of that much. I get it because they're trying to be covert, so the blackness works. And obviously these characters are very, very worried about COVID.
Well, you know, right out of the gate, the movie starts off following this teenager in a grocery store, and between you know, the fact that we're following a younger person and they're getting mysterious messages, I'm like, did you guys just copy your own formula for Scream? You know?
I know. Yeah, instead of the phone calls, now it's text messages. That's exactly what I said. This feels a lot like the beginning of Scream. And I actually didn't hate it because it was kind of a new take, and I did know it was Williamson. I didn't know if he was parroting himself. It's just that you kind of liked Drew Barrymore's character. You thought we knew Drew Barrymore going into it. I think if they had a name there that we saw get killed early, it might have been more effective. You know, like an actor that we would recognize, and it would be a little more shocking, like the Steven Seagal and Executive Decision sort of situation. You know,
right.
But I didn't really care about this kid, and I didn't have any context for why he was being targeted, and it wasn't working for me in that sense.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that you don't necessarily have a likable character. You've got a brief interaction with him, and is a woman pregnant, or is she carrying her baby? I forget. And he reaches for the last thing. She's like, "Really, dude?" And he gives it back. It's like his save the cat moment where he's just. I'm like, this just seems very formulaic. And then they break formula, and I'm like, I almost don't know if it works.
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, I don't think it did for me. I'm trying to like remember really good moments, and I'm kind of coming up short. Other than, I guess, okay, there are some good players in this. Let's mention the good aspects of this. I am starting to really like this Gideon Adlin, who is Pamela Adlin's daughter. I had seen her priorly on There's Something About Pam, that Renee Zellweger show. Okay. She's really, really effective in that as one of the daughters of the woman that Pam had killed. And now Pam's stealing all the money essentially from that family. Yeah. Really effective in that. I didn't mind her in this, but it's just she wasn't likable again. Like the character, we just find out that she was kind of like half cheating on her boyfriend sort of thing. Because he shows up out of nowhere, and they were in an open relationship, not open, but they weren't exclusive, I guess is the word, right?
Yeah.
So she's kind of established as somebody who's not loyal to him, and he's also kind of a creeper for showing up without being invited. And then, of course, you have the character I think we're supposed to care the most about in Mary, right? Yeah. Mary Woodlow. And I didn't care that much about her either, if I'm honest with you. I mean, she falls from the roof. I really thought she was like paralyzed at that point, but apparently not.
Should have been.
But yeah. Okay. Actually, the first death beyond the opening death was fun. To see the boyfriend with the flagpole going through him, where he was essentially being held up like a skewer sort of. That was decent.
It was fun. Yeah,
I didn't mind that one in terms of, you know,
again, another character though that we don't necessarily like.
No, there's nobody likable, and I almost like our bad guys more than our good guys, because that's where your actual names are in Jane Addams, and of course the hubby of Cersei, right? Lena Headey, Markman Chaka.
Yeah, this guy's so good, and he is good,
and he's been in some amazing horror movies of late too,
and TV shows. He was in The Outsider.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
He was in Ozark. The guy's brilliant actor. and I was excited to see him, but I'm like, I know that this was a reveal, but I need more of him. And just to go back really quick, the other two main characters, because we've blown through the first act into the second, we don't really know enough about them. All we know is that they're friends and they're going to quarantine together.
And that's it. And the one is more worried about her dad getting in than the other.
Right. There's that.
But they seem like spoiled brats. They get to go to this beautiful cabin together and have like a lake to themselves. And there was just, you couldn't sympathize with them, even when they were then being terrorized. But one thing that annoyed me is that like they're trying to kill our main character Parker here throughout the whole thing, but then at the end it's like if they hadn't, they wouldn't be able to tell her why they were going to kill her, and it just felt really strange. I will give it one exceptional moment when we kind of meet our mastermind, Jane Addams, Pamela, whose son ultimately died via COVID that she traced back to our main character. That's kind of the big twist of it, which is ludicrous. It's silly.
But that's
silly
what the whole movie is based off of, is just this little twist, you know? It may be too small to...
It's not enough. It wasn't effective. But what was effective is when she's almost killed then by Muchacha, who chased after her and is about to kill her in the streets. And she rolls up in her car.
Yes.
And
Where's
of course, yes, she goes to the car, but she won't let her in because she's not wearing a mask.
Right.
Because we don't know at this point that she's in on it. And of course she is. But it was just a fun little moment where she's like, are you serious? You're not going to let me in without having a mask? I did enjoy that.
It's almost,
that was the best bit for sure.
It's almost like they made this movie to just almost in kind of time capsule certain interactions and isms of the COVID times, you know, the empty grocery store.
I think you're right.
The hand sanitizer.
Wiping down the groceries.
Yes, wiping down your cereal boxes, masks everywhere. The idea that you really shouldn't be quarantining together if you've been exposed to other people. And these girls were just at parties. And so here's the other thing that, again, if we're talking about likability, Parker, one of our main characters, who's basically responsible for all this chaos, was exposed, then is quarantining with her best friend, who's taking this very seriously. And this girl is like, no, I'm good.
He's asymptomatic.
Yes.
But she has it.
And basically is going to hurt Mary's father, who she's mostly concerned about. So again, not likable.
No, not at all likable.
Not a good friend.
And I would say you're right. The dynamics between the characters were just so lacking, half-baked, I would even say. Enough so, or maybe I'm a little silly because Mara caught it and I didn't, but I thought Menchaca for a while was like her oldest son.
Oh.
But they're married apparently? I didn't get the relationship there, honestly.
Yeah.
I thought it was she had my three sons and they were all working
both sons
two of
are
them
dead.
Were working to get vengeance. Yes. Okay. That does make more sense given the age, but for too long I thought that was her oldest son. Brain fog, man. I had COVID while I was watching it. So.
Understood. So I will say this. I liked it for the fact that it was about it was clever at times. And I like that it was, you know, I guess, again, love slasher genre, but it was a fun way of, I mean, because the slasher genre is sort of just rinse and repeat, right?
Right.
A lot of these stories are the same. At least they made it about something.
That's true.
So for that reason, I thought, and again, I didn't have to pay for it because it was on Peacock. I have Peacock through my cable provider. So it was just kind of like a fun bonus movie. And
yes, I'm glad I saw it. It did fly by. So it wasn't like I was tortured at all. It's very forgettable with the exception of it really exploiting the COVID stuff. But yeah, I mean, I loved how our bad guy gets it in the end. Both of them, the antler death for Menchaca, and then her getting burned alive, running down the street. That was my favorite shot when she's running down the street. Yeah, it was kind of reminded me of Texas Chainsaw
Massacre. I think we were all supposed to like.
Yes. Yeah. I dug that. There were some interesting aspects in terms of it mostly was a single location shoot for the most part, and I thought it moved so fast for being primarily in the cabin. I got to give it that credit. I just I I think it would have been different if Kevin wrote it alone. You know, I don't know much about Caitlin Crabb. I don't talk smack about her. Oh, she was crew on the newest Scream, but this is the first thing she's got a writer credit for. She was an assistant on Scream, so that must have been how she.
And I don't like to just connect the dots, but I'm wondering if they just paired her up with Kevin and just add his credibility behind it. And
that's what I was thinking. It was like a huge favor to her to now get in the game.
Right.
But if you love slashers, it's worth a watch. I wouldn't necessarily suggest it to casual viewers of horror, but the hardcore.
No.
Might enjoy it. Let's talk one that just blew my mind. And I'm so glad because I hadn't seen it. I didn't think I was going to be able to, but I squeezed it in right before this, so it's all fresh in my mind.
Fresh in your foggy brain.
Yes, yeah, as much as it can be crisp in there. It's The Sadness, which at first I thought it was just a Chinese film, but it turns out to be a Taiwanese film directed by a Canadian guy.
That was interesting, right?
That is very strange to me. And it's like his first feature too, and it was well done in terms of, I mean, questionable about some of the stuff that goes on in it. Maybe it went too far and unnecessary, but direction-wise, it also moved really quickly, and some of the most memorable zombie gore stuff ever.
I'd say that I'm not gonna say they got away with it. I think that they were probably able to do it. I don't know if we could do that in an American film. A lot of
interesting. Okay. Plus, because the way that they portrayed the president of China, he kind of looks a little like our main guy Jing, and then the way he then dies with a grenade in the mouth, the head exploding. I don't think China would have been okay with that. I'm wondering if there was kind of a subtle play going on, subtext to China here.
Could be
in a way like what they're doing to the Taiwanese, trying to zombify them, you know what I mean? Make them one of them. I just saw it, so I'm gonna have to think more about what's actually going on there. But
here's something I want to just tell you really quick that this blew my mind. Did you look up the population of Taiwan?
No.
23.57 million people. Basically.
Oh my God.
Yes. That was from 2020. They have 23 million. And I'm ignorant to the size of islands, but I was not expecting it, because in the movie they mentioned that one guy's like, let me do the math for you. That's 4 million infected people.
Right.
And I was like,
I didn't put two and two together. I thought it was like the whole of China, but if it's Taiwan specifically,
it was just
4.5 is only the 15%.
Because it's I think
it's jam-packed.
Oh my gosh.
And it's perfect for zombification, right? I mean, everywhere you look, you're on top of somebody.
Yeah.
And that was the case because there was very few moments where things were copacetic, you know?
Right.
It was very few lulls. I felt like the action was constant. What moments stood out? Well, first, I guess we should just give the premise. This is the Alvin virus, which is like the flu, they call it. And it has mutated to unlock these dormant aspects that are like rabies. In it, dormant proteins that have a rabies-like quality. But it goes to a new extent that we haven't seen before, and that these are very thinking zombies. They're still themselves. They have memories of who they are and what has just happened before they turned into zombies. But there's this psychosexual sadism going on there too in them, which is really how this kind of gets next level in yikes sort of territory.
They said it amplifies basically your anger and like your sex drive, which are apparently very similar.
Yes. He was talking all about. We meet a character toward the end who's been studying it. He's holed up in the maternity ward and he has murdered all the babies for science.
Yeah, that was just insane.
When you find the baby in the garbage can, that was pretty horrific because it had been turned to. So you have a baby with black eyes, like half crying, half wanting to gnaw on you. I don't know. What's the baby going to do?
So when I'm watching this, I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of like Danny Boyle's
28 Days Later.
28 Days Later. And then I'm thinking, no, you know what it's more like is the American film, The Crazies.
Yes, but that's of course like comedic horror. Yes. There's nothing funny about this one.
No.
But
the idea that they're not zombies. I think you could put it in a zombie category, but they're not zombies. And you could also say that 28 days later, they're not zombies. They're the infected. And that's what these people are. And that's what the crazies were. I mean, it was like it would turn you into an insane person.
Right. In the Crazies, did they talk like they do in this one, though?
I don't think so. And
that to me is the big difference, because of the things that they say are just as horrific as the things vulgar, that they do.
Vile.
Especially that is emphasized at the end.
So you were going to ask me about some scenes. Like the whole scene on the train scene starts off really, really interesting, because our main character, well, it's hard to say who our main character is at this point.
Our final girl?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. It's true. But she's being hit on by an older man, and she's kind of like, I just want to read my book.
Right.
And then I'm like, where are they going with this? I mean, this guy's not infected yet. But then you see somebody enter the car, or he stabs himself, or he starts stabbing people left and right. But there's
very effective too, because this guy comes in with sunglasses on, right? And part of how you can tell is the black eye. So you don't know at first. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. You're exactly right.
But you're right. I was also confused. What are they going to do with this old man? But then he turns out to be one of the scariest zombies, or maybe even just like villains I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In a horror, because he is tenacious.
A vendetta against her, which there's nothing to support that. Like, he has no right to be mad at her. But he's this old guy.
Things he does. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the things he does. But there's some people on that train. We mentioned it. There's a lot of sexual.
Right.
Just, I don't even know how to describe them. Just. This movie isn't just about killing people.
Horror sexual fantasies fulfilled by those who are turned.
I mean, and yes, I imagine it can be very triggering too. This movie deals with rape.
Honestly, yes, it really does a lot too. It doesn't shy away from anything. As I tried to focus on more of the regular gore, like when the nose gets bit off, that was fun.
Yes, that was great. But, what about the scene? I think one of the first scenes, like, that sort of sets the tone of this is what we think at the time is our main character. He stops to get coffee, and then that old man from the very beginning enters, and they think it's a grandma, right? They're like, "Grandma, are you okay?" Then the nose.
Oh my gosh, her face too.
The fryer dumped on the head, and then the face,
and then ripped off his skin. Yeah, I gotta say that it was one of the most imaginative in terms of how people went.
Oh well, not just that. What about the scene with the 4 or 5 students on the basketball court?
Oh my goodness!
And they wrap the barbed wire around. It's just, oh my gosh, talking about imaginative.
And then ram him into the barbed wire directly in his groin. And then, of course, our main character Jim scares him off. But then when he unties him, he's like, "Oh, I was enjoying that. I was just about to get my jollies." It was. Here's the thing, though. Going back to Sick. Didn't care about those characters, and for the most part, it was kind of tame in terms of violence and gore. This one, I cared so much about our 2 main characters. Honestly, I did. We established their relationship really effectively at the beginning. I felt like when ultimately everything's placid, you're in bed with them, and they're supposed to go on vacation, but he's accepted a job because he doesn't get that much work. She's pissed off at him. So the tension that's built there, and then you kind of see him do banal stuff like feed the fish and eat this delicious looking bao sandwich that he had, and then talk to the neighbor, who of course later comes to cut off his fingers.
Which I forgot about. His fingers do get chopped off.
Yes. But I thought for a little time they spent together at the beginning, I understood them and I liked them in that small portion more than I like the characters in all of Sick, So when you're seeing them then go through these really, really, really horrific things, like I mentioned to you, on the level of Irresistible. But here's the thing. I think some of them were a little tongue-in-cheek. So, for example, in Irresistible, the most notorious scene is somebody gets their head caved in with a fire extinguisher. The exact same thing happens here, but it doesn't have that same sort of like heart-sinking, stomach-churning effect that Irresistible did.
Yeah.
Because at this point, you've seen so much gore. And in a way, it's like gore for gore's sake at some point in this, you know? And
I'll also say in Irreversible, where the lighting in there, I think, made it look a little bit more real. And in this version, in this moment, there's a point where it's just the repetitiveness of it almost makes you think it's not, or it looks not real or as real.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe there's that separates.
I don't want to diminish.
No.
Most of the time, I was really impressed with what was going on in terms of the makeup, and I didn't like. I mean, when he's biking through the city, everyone's got their intestines out. I felt like it was overkill, and the amount of intestines I saw everywhere it just seemed like too much. But I guess intestines are long, so
they were probably like, "What can we show that looks real enough
from afar?"
I don't know. I'm trying to justify it. It was.
I dug it a lot. I don't think it's for the faint of heart at all. But if you're a zombie fan and you like stuff like what is the one, Train to Busan?
Yes,
it's in the same vein as that, wouldn't you say? Just much more with a wider scope, I guess, than that one has. And actually, I think there is subtle political undertones there. And what I want to really try and understand is I don't know if I can because I don't know their culture as well as I'd like to, is the sexual stuff, because that is so prevalent in this. And you see it in the instance with the guy they punch in the face who was about to shut the door on them, the security guard. And then when she uses his phone, I mean, he's got this like anime girl all busty on it. And it just seemed like the messages were being slung out there about how men treat women over there, sort of thing. And I mean, in that sense, it's good and deep, but it's still it would be so hard for someone that isn't a horror fan to watch this. I think they would turn it off really quick.
Absolutely, they would. And if it was in the theater, they'd walk out on it. No, I really. This movie is, I think, only made for horror fans. Yeah.
Interestingly, I'm reading here in the production, the principal photography on it lasted 28 days.
Whoa.
I love 28 Days Later, but I really like 28 Weeks Later too. And a lot of people don't. I mean, it's kind of,
I will never
opening's amazing.
Right. But I'll just never give up on the dream that we're going to get 28 months later.
I think it's happening. I think it is happening. I am excited about it.
But those are great examples. Those are great examples of other virus, not necessarily zombie movies, but a virus infection, rage, like gosh, what was it in Planet Terror? I think they describe it as almost like a rage that's being but there's I love
it's such a good angle, and it doesn't always have to be horror, because I was thinking back in like Children of Men deals with it. What's another one? 12 Monkeys is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that deals with virus that wipes us all out. It has horror qualities to it. But the one, I know we hadn't talked about viruses that much before, but I did mention to you recently that I'd seen Old People, which deals with all old people kind of turn into murderous, sadistic, and they can talk in that one too. So that one actually is kind of in the similar vein as this.
Let me make a note too.
There was another one I watched a couple years ago called Contracted. Have you heard about this one?
Yeah.
Contracted is about a woman who's kind of sexually assaulted, and then the disease that she gets kind of makes her murderous. It was effective. I remember it being pretty darn good. And of course, here's your cliche ones like World War Z and I Am Legend. I liked I Am Legend, but I don't remember really liking World War Z that much.
One of my favorites, and I think people kind of forget about all the time, is Cabin Fever.
Yes, that is great. That's pretty gruesome too.
Roth, yes, the idea of just like the skin melting off of your body. I also am a huge
stuff
fan
will always get me
of the Wreck movies.
Yes. Okay.
Wreck 1, 2, 3, and then in America they made, what was it called? Quarantined with Sister and Dexter.
Can't remember her name. Jennifer or something.
Yep, that's maybe. Who it is.
I didn't really love that Quarantine. So you're saying that was in the same vein as Wreck? Because I don't think I've seen Wreck.
It was. They just changed the name. It was a remake of Wreck. And the Wreck movies, I believe there are 4 of them total, are very fun. Really great jump scares.
I wanted to ask you, going back to The Last of Us, when they're in the city at night on the movie screen, or I'm sorry, the marquee, it said Midnight Madness. Have you seen that movie? It's a Disney movie about kind of a scavenger hunt sort of thing.
No,
I was just wondering if that was, I guess they're kind of going on a hunt themselves, if there was any additional significance to that.
I don't know. I don't think so.
And finally, I don't know, did you have anything else you want to say about Sadness? Because we are
no, I mean, I enjoyed it, and I'm almost like a little scared how much I enjoyed it.
Same. Yeah, I know. But you know, it's better for people to get out that sort of weirdness if it's in them through that.
Yes.
Watching that instead of doing it. So that's why violent movies and video games should never be banned. But before we sign off, I wanted to mention to you that I did see Megan.
Oh, you did?
Yes, and I'm looking forward to talking about that because there's a virus of a different sort in that, I guess you could say, and that it's a robot virus. Okay. And then, additionally, I didn't realize there's a movie called Stay Alive. So this has been my sign off.
Your sign off, Stay Alive.
And there's a movie, Stay Alive, so we might have to do a Stay Alive cast at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen it?
No.
Yeah, me neither. So I'd be going in blind. But
I like that. I will definitely check out Megan, and maybe we can do that like next week or so.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be cool because I enjoyed it. Until then, stay alive.